And not only that, there was no light permitted in the tent. Can't you imagine? Can't you hear him talking? Oh, baby, I've been working for you for 7 years. And it was just like it was a few days. This is worth it. Then when the sun came out, he realized that he didn't have Rachel, but he had Rachel's sister, Leah. Leah was cock-eyed. She had a weak eye. Some people say a tender eye. He didn't want weak-eyed, tender-eyed, cock-eyed Leah. And screamed in the morning and said, Laban, what have you done? Not only was Rebekah a trickster, her brother Laban was a trickster. Just touch your neighbor and say, what goes around comes around. Whatever you sow, you're going to reap. And so Laban said, well, it is customary that when you marry into a family, you marry the eldest daughter first. So if you want Rachel, you have to work another 7 years. He had to work 14 years for the woman he wanted. Look at your neighbor and say, how long have you been working? But at the time of the text, and I got to stop because I'm out of time, Jacob realized that he has now become what his name suggests. Every day he had to live with the guilt of what he has done. What about you? Are there some things that you've done in your life that you are sorry for? There are some things that some of us have done in our past, but our past was last week. And now God said in so many words, by the angel's actions, you're going to have to deal with it. And I stopped by to tell you today that if you really want to know who you are, you're going to have to deal with your actions. Just touch your neighbor and say, you're going to have to deal with it today. Jacob now learns a lesson that all of us should learn. That if you don't get it the right way, you won't like it. In the text in Genesis chapter 32 and 24, it says that he was left alone. He was stripped. You'll never come to know who you really are in a crowd. It's not until you're left by yourself to do some introspection, to ask yourself some questions. Who am I? I want you to ask yourself that question this morning. Who am I? I'm not talking about who they've been calling you. I'm not talking about what you have been identified as. But if you really want to go on with the Lord and be all that God wants you to be, why, you have to ask yourself that question. Who am I? I wish I had some real people in this church that would ask that question, who am I? Not the name that my mama gave me, not the name that my friends call me, but who am I? And the only person that can answer that question is God. So you need to lift up your hand and say, Lord, I want to be all that you want me to be. But before I can be what you want me to be and do the things that you want me to do, I've got to realize and find out who I really am. So I want you today to tell me, who am I? Lord, who am I? I got so many quiet people in here. I know it ain't. He was left alone. He was stripped. And secondly, if you don't know who you are, just touch your neighbor and say, you're going to be struggling. Could that be the reason why some of us are wrestling right now? Wrestling and don't know why you're wrestling. Struggling and don't have an answer for it. It's because you don't know who you are. Just look at him wrestling.